of the books. I know some of the canon. I've watched the Clone Wars animated series because it's awesome.
It is. I wonder how many people
played,
haven't watched
Knights
Clone
of the Old
Wars.
Republic 1 and 2.
Yeah, I always wonder how many people haven't watched.
It's canon, so they should.
Yeah, and I believe that. But it's been an interesting thing because like some people don't. Like some people when I talk about Clone Wars, they're like that cartoon thing. I'm like, yeah, that cartoon thing, but it's like Clone Wars and Rebels, especially right now, is kind of important because Dave Filoni is working with Jon Favreau, and they're the ones that are kind of taking over the whole rest of Star Wars.
Yeah. Well, so Filoni's been doing. It's Filoni that's been doing The Mandalorian, right?
Correct. Well, him and Jon Favreau.
I can't remember which one is it.
Him and Jon Favreau.
They both are. They're doing a good job with that. And I remember seeing like on the most recent episode, and then of course the news coming out. They're doing a series is the word I'm looking for on Ahsoka. I was excited because like, wow, they're taking canon stuff a lot of people actually don't know about and making it popular. So that's cool.
For sure. And I think that's the thing with Dave Filoni being a part of it, since he was a big part of Clone Wars and Rebels. Like when people talk about when Grogu went to the Seeing Stone and they're wondering what Jedi ends up hearing about him, I don't like, a lot of people would love it to be, Luke Skywalker. I've heard people talk about possibly it being Mace Windu and all these other characters coming back.
Not going to be Luke.
And I'm like, well, you think about Dave Filoni being a big part of this, you're probably looking at someone from Rebels. And, some people float around Ezra. And then the other thing, though, because I just got done, I know I'm a little late to the game, but I just got done playing, why can't I say the word? Fallen Order, Jedi Fallen Order, Star Wars game.
I haven't played that one yet. That's the newest one, right?
I think it might be the most recent.
I played The Force Awakens 1 and 2.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's the most recent one.
Yeah, I haven't really played those, but the Fallen Order one, so it follows the Jedi Cal Kestis. And what's really interesting to me is in that game, you interact with all these like balls, these orbs, these like stone orbs, and the writing that is on them and the way that you interact with them looks a lot like the Seeing Stone in that episode of Mandalorian.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so
having played that, I couldn't make that connection.
For sure. And if you were to, you could go on YouTube and see some of the people playing the game. And in my opinion, so Cal Kestis, even in that video game, it does a flashback scene to him while Order 66 was happening. And you get to go through all that with Cal Kestis, the character you play in Fallen Order, and you get to escape. You're trying to escape the clone troopers that are trying to kill you and your master, and you escape the Order 66 deal. Now, which makes me wonder if, with all these similarities in that episode with Grogu in the Seeing Stone, is maybe we'll finally get a real life version of Cal Kestis from Fallen Order. They might throw that in there.
Is Fallen Order considered canon?
I believe it is.
Oh, okay.
There's nothing in there that would throw off the canon.
Right? Okay. And it surprises me them doing a video so a lot of the Star Wars games are open-ended to a certain extent. Like you can walk, the light side, dark side, whatever. So I can see how a lot of games can't be included in canon for those reasons. Like you're never going to get your character from Knights of the Old Republic in the canon because there's so many ways he can possibly go.
No.
But, so I was wondering about that.
Yeah. No, it's not very open-ended, to be honest. I mean, it does allow you to explore a little bit more of the maps than your particular mission on each map. But I thought it was pretty cool because it's very cinematic. It's definitely very story mode driven, the actual game itself. So it feels like a movie. And since it feels like a movie, I feel like there's nothing in there that I can see that really takes away from the canon. So for them to be able to plug in someone like Cal Kestis, especially since what's coming out now is Fallen Order Part 2. That's about to drop. And it just seems like good timing for
I guess I'm gonna have to go catch up.
Yeah, it seems like good timing for if you want to try to double it up, market from a marketing perspective, and you're like, we have a sequel to this video game coming out. We need Grogu to meet up with a Jedi who also survived Order 66, and a lot of people are saying that Grogu was part of that, and that he also survived as a youngling during Order 66. And it just seems to make too much sense to me to ignore that they might bring a new guy up into live action like Cal Kestis and have him meet up with Grogu somehow. And you get to promote your video game.
I mean, all pluses.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, it makes a lot of sense to me. Like, if I was in the marketing department, that's what I'd be thinking is like, wow, okay, so if we can make people really like Cal Kestis in Mandalorian, or if they end up doing a branch off series, which I have a feeling we're gonna jump into time, because I know that they've talked about the next season of Mandalorian is gonna jump a couple years. And so if that happens, I do think that maybe we'll get a Grogu series by itself.
Well, the one thing I know is that they can't have Luke because nobody else can play Luke. That's got to be Mark Hamill, and he's just too old at this point for that time frame. And they're not going to have Luke, so that's for sure. Though, and then just because of it would break too many things if it was like Obi-Wan or something pre.
It definitely, I don't think.
Well, no, Obi-Wan's gone. I forget. This is after the Death Star. Duh.
Correct.
This is after. Sorry, this is after the Death Star. I was mixing it up with before and after. So it can't be Obi-Wan. But yeah, there's not a. I mean, there's more options than most people think, but still not a bunch. Not a lot that would make sense. I kind of been on board with the Ezra one, like what they've been saying.
I like the Ezra idea, but part of me feels like, okay, if we're going to go in this new adventure of, which the Mandalorian's technically kind of a new adventure, and now you're getting the live action Ahsoka and all these people, which Ahsoka's getting her own series. And then you have Bo-Katan, which is amazing that, why can't I say her name?
That was cool.
The actress who also voiced her. Why can't I say her name? She's so famous. Oh, God.
The one that voiced her, or the one that was
in the Mandalorian? It's the same person. It's the same person. It's what's her?
Yeah, she's
Katie
from
Sackhoff. Katie Sackhoff.
Yeah, Katie Sackhoff.
Yeah.
I was gonna say because I was thinking, Cylons.
She's
Battlestar.
Yeah. So
like, why can't I think of Battlestar Galactica of all things?
Yeah, but it's very interesting because I think the only thing I would disagree with you on is, I mean, I agree with you that I feel like bringing Luke into the Mandalorian would be rough, but if it's in passing, I think it can be done. And they're wanting to already do a bridge series with a younger Luke, and there's two options that they've floated on the table. There's three. So they've talked about bringing Mark Hamill in and then using de-aging technology like they did with
de-aging technology.
Yeah. Like they did with, all the Marvel
bunch movies. Of people.
And yeah. And then the other thing that they have floated around, because there's
Samuel L. Jackson in
Samuel L. Jackson, Robert Redford.
Yeah, Samuel L. Jackson in what's her name?
Captain Marvel.
The one that takes in the 90s.
Yeah, Captain Marvel.
Yeah. I'm having a hard time with names tonight.
No, it happens, especially with this delay too, because I'll tell you, it's funny because I was like, Captain Marvel, and then you were still thinking. And then I was like, and then you're like, yeah, Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
What's up, Holly B?
That's the one.
Yeah, so the other thing too, I think with Luke, the other option they floated around, and a lot of people have actually signed petitions to Disney to have Sebastian Stan play Mark Hamill or play Luke.
Or Luke.
Yeah, and if you look up Sebastian Stan, you got to be careful because some of the images have been doctored with Mark Hamill's face over him. So the ones that look exactly like Mark Hamill are not real. but he does have a similarity when he's not all Winter Soldiery.
Yeah, okay.
So that's been floated around.
I can kind of see it. Yeah, actually.
Especially with him being a little bit older, like Luke's not like in this Mandalorian timeline. It's not like Luke is going to be like young, especially if they skip a few years. And then the other part to that too is if you give Sebastian Stan a beard and have him wearing like the robes with the hood, it's going to be similar enough. And Mark Hamill has already.
I can see it happening.
Yeah. Mark Hamill has given his seal of approval to Sebastian Stan if it ever happens.
Yeah, I'm seeing some of these mashups like what you're talking about. And I can see it getting pulled off.
Yeah. But then the other thing too is you could use a combination of, so instead of using full on CG faces for de-aging, you could take someone like Sebastian Stan, give him a beard, and do a little bit of tweaking just to give him that Mark Hamill look instead of going all on with because the de-aging technology has gotten really good, but at the same time, like that's a lot of work, especially in a series to do weekly.
But they just deep fake it.
Yeah, but they could deep fake it too. Then the other point to that too is like considering, because they've considered having a Luke series, but
like you get Sebastian, he's got the close enough.
He's close, but that's about as close as you're gonna get.
And
but then you got to think about
Sebastian.
Yeah, then you got to think about vocal tones and stuff, because this is going to be one of the things for someone to pull off a Luke Skywalker. They've always say like when people like Ewan McGregor, when he did Obi-Wan, he didn't necessarily emulate. Oh gosh, why can't I say the actor's name? The actor that played the original Obi-Wan, I can't say his name right now, but he didn't emulate him. He just was Obi-Wan as a younger person. But if you're going to do Luke Skywalker, you're going to have to figure out how to be Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker. That's the only way you're going to get away with it.
Yeah, because this takes place. Hamill's already been pre and post, so there's an establishment there.
Yeah, and I think that fans
get into that.
Are going to have a rough time with anyone not being like Mark Hamill. Not just Luke Skywalker, but being Mark Hamill. Because that was one of the first movies in a long time and since that, because George Lucas did a good job for a while of picking people who were already actors, but they weren't known. So you saw Luke Skywalker, you didn't see Mark Hamill. You didn't see Carrie Fisher, you saw Princess Leia. And even when people would say, like when they were in other movies, or if you saw Mark Hamill or you saw Carrie Fisher, you were like, oh, look, Princess Leia's in that movie. Or Luke Skywalker's in that movie, or Luke Skywalker does the voice of the Joker. Like, so Mark Hamill.
I was just thinking that.
So Mark Hamill is Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker isn't Mark Hamill. Like, it's one in the same, symbiotic. There's no break. And so if Sebastian Stan were to play Luke Skywalker, he's going to have to be Mark Hamill and Luke Skywalker.
It's a tough order
to pull it off. Which, I don't know. We'll see. Because I know they've wanted to. The other thing that they've been doing, they're calling it the Filoni-verse, because they're trying to retcon the sequel trilogies and make it make more sense and show us how Luke Skywalker got so disillusioned from the whole Jedi thing and why he was so upset.
Yeah, I would love to have some retcons on that, because that
You're gonna honestly, have to.
So my thoughts on the sequel trilogies. Yeah, they're a spectacle and they're fun to watch, but they are not Star Wars to me.
They aren't.
They don't.
And we talked about this.
I've had some thoughts on this too. Like, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So like we talked about this, me and my buddy, we talked about it on the last recording I did, which by the time this hits on YouTube, that should have already been up. So go check that out. The sequel trilogy, in my opinion, and this has been, I told my wife this, I've told everybody this, and when episode 7 came out, I was okay with it. Like, I'm like, okay, where are they going? Like, I'm okay with it. And then Rian Johnson comes along and we get episode 8. And I'm like, what are we doing? Where are we? Who am I? What is going on? I don't know what to do with my life, and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And I was like, great
But
movie,
you
great
had
movie, great
a
standalone
director
movie.
with one vision.
Yeah, if that was a standalone movie, it'd be kind of cool to watch.
Yeah.
It's a great movie, but like not a Star Wars movie. And it doesn't connect with episode 7.
Yeah.
And then 9, they tried to like fix
Here's
it.
my breakdown. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, because here's my breakdown for that. So you have one director at first, which has its own problems as a standalone movie, and all that. It's fine. I'll get to that, but we'll break this part down first. You have one director with his vision. You have another director coming in for the second movie with a different vision that wants to break the other one's vision, and then you have the same one as the first coming back saying, "No, we're doing it my way the whole time," and it's really disjointed. But from all that anyway, there's some major problems that just don't make it a Star Wars film. They break their own physics, if you will. They break their own rules. You have some established lore, established physics, if you will, established worlds that world building that they just don't use. Like Rey is as a non-Star Wars movie, it's great. It's whatever. It's fun. It's a spectacle to watch, but it is not believable when you have 6 prior movies of how difficult it is to learn to use the Force and all of that, to have somebody come in and just be able to do it with no prior training, to be able to hold her own against somebody who has had extensive training, even under Luke Skywalker for a while there, obviously Kylo Ren, and like hold her own against him for a bit and even manage to like stab him, even if he is trying like to get her on his side. Like it breaks so many things. Luke had to train on Dagobah to do anything, and even he left early, could barely use the Force, and just like helped him pilot his X-wing. Right? It took him a long time, and yet Rey's able to just, oh, okay, I guess I can do this.
Mm-hmm. Correct. And so that's one of my issues for sure. The run through on that. So I do agree with you on all of that. My other problem, and this was my actual theory, is that I do believe that Kathleen Kennedy in Star Wars, when George Lucas was kind of a side note after a while, what happened, in my opinion, was they thought, hey, do you think we could reboot Star Wars? And so that when we go into future generations, we can have our own like characters and stuff in them. Since, Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford are getting old, maybe we can reboot this thing. And the problem with that is you can't reboot it at the end of a saga. So like they tried to reboot it with a trilogy that is the Skywalker saga. And when you reboot it there, the problem is if they wanted to reboot Star Wars, they need to reboot it after episode 9. So like instead of
they could do that,
the saga
at the same time, like at the same time though, even among that, they can reboot it, but they should still work within the established world building that's already there, and they don't. And that's what bothers me so much, is that
too. But that's
the actors, and that's not on the actors. The actors did a great job. That's on the writers. The story is terrible. Rey is a Mary Sue, who can't do anything wrong, and that's bad writing. It's just bad writing.
It is. But I agree with you.
Daisy Ridley did a great job acting her.
Exactly. The performances were great. Like I said, like we were saying before, like these movies stand alone on their own as, nuts and bolts movies. Like the actors they executed.
They're fun to watch.
Cinematography's great. The graphics are great. But like I said, when you attempt to reboot something within a trilogy, because this wasn't a trilogy, I'm sorry, it was sequels. So episode 8 was a sequel of episode 7. It wasn't a trilogy.
Yeah, there's so many problems there with them switching directors, then switching back.
Well, you can even switch directors because 4, 5, and 6 didn't have the same directors.
Yeah, but they all knew where it was going.
Exactly. You had a plan. So you said, this is what the 3 movies are. We're going to have this person. It's just like when you have a TV show. So like one of my favorite TV shows that I've watched is Supernatural. And you have, different directors for different episodes. You have the actors directing different episodes, but it still feels like the same show. It doesn't
Yeah,
change.
right. You got. I mean, there's so many different things like that. Look at Star Trek.
Yeah.
Star
Yeah.
Trek has like you have the same thing. Actors directed them, but every single one feels like a Star Trek episode because they know
Exactly.
what their brand is. They work within their own world building, not to break it.
Mhm.
It's just everything is cohesive, and they can have individual storylines, and that is fine. And one doesn't even have to like uh, branch into another. You can have um, filler episodes when you're waiting for more stuff to come, but as long as you stick within that world building and keep things uh, the way that they are traditionally, like, I don't want to say supposed to be, but the way you're not breaking the world's physics that you have created. um like I was saying with Star Wars, you can't have Luke and every other known Jedi or even Sith take forever to learn what they need to do and how to harness that, and then have one character to go, nope. I mean, look at Grogu in The Mandalorian. He's been trained, and he can either use a very powerful burst on a whim and then fall asleep, or just like pull little balls to him. And he has had way more training than Ray ever had.
For sure. And like the other thing when you think about
And
this
he's a
is
force sensitive race.
exactly. And when you think about the other thing, I think where they break. So first of all, we could talk story all night long. Like the sequel trilogy just breaks from the story of Star Wars like in so many different ways. And within their own trilogy, they broke their own trilogy's rules. Snoke became a throwaway character when they
Yeah.
bumped him up to be this mysterious freaking emperor. And then all of a sudden he's nothing. Really doesn't matter. Just kidding. Just kidding, guys.
Yep.
Nothing to see here. And then the other
Yep.
part, what I was saying though, is like you're breaking the whole thing because I do not see, there's no retcon or explanation that will be good enough for me, that will be good enough to explain why it was so easy for Snoke to seduce Ben with Luke Skywalker, who, if you've paid attention to any of the extended universe books and like what he's supposed to be, Luke's power should have been powerful enough by then. There's no way a Snoke, maybe a Palpatine, but no way a Snoke is going to get one over on a Luke Skywalker. He's too powerful at that point, in my opinion.
Right.
He's been too ingrained in it. And Luke becomes one of the most powerful force wielders ever known to the Star Wars universe. So how is Ben being
Right. I mean, look at
Snoke without him knowing?
right. And yeah, and even Anakin before him, you watch the Clone Wars, you know how powerful Anakin was. There was
Exactly.
that whole little arc where he had to go out and meet the two. I guess I can't even describe them, the beings of force or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
light side, dark side, the sister and the brother with the father. You know what I'm talking about?
Correct. Yeah.
On the mountainside, and
Yes.
more of he was the chosen one, but
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, like just how powerful and how Darth Vader was. And then Luke, of course, it's hard to say he bests him in the end because really it was Vader's change of heart, but even
Yes.
so, Luke is right along that path.
Correct. And the other thing too, when you think about Luke's power progression, if that's what you want to call it, so like in Return of the Jedi, you can make a lot of the claims that he was pretty close to where Anakin got. But the thing was, Anakin has always been known to, it's something like he was only ever going to be able to get to about 85% of what Palpatine's power was, just due to the fact that he lost so much of his body, and like he has to use a lot of his suit to help him do things. And so, and I can't remember where I read it, but somewhere in canon, Palpatine made Darth Vader's suit to be way susceptible to Force lightning, so that he could cripple Anakin whenever he wanted to. And Anakin is never going to live up to his full potential in the Force, just due to the simple fact of his suit and the things that have to keep him alive, and et cetera, et cetera. And so Luke was perceived to be the guy that was going to become, what Anakin probably could have become without all of his setbacks. And it bugs me that Luke in the sequel trilogies is just this downtrodden, sad guy who couldn't keep Ben safe, who couldn't go out and probably know that Snoke existed. And I feel like he probably would have taken Snoke out or something. And I just don't see how you come up with you can come up with an explanation, but I don't see how they can come up with a good explanation for how it all came apart.
It would have been, and yes, everybody would have expected it. And sometimes it doesn't matter. You don't need to subvert expectations. Sometimes you can play into expectations and still get just as good of reception. I feel like it would have been better if Snoke was Darth Plagueis.
Darth Plagueis?
Plagueis, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Darth Plagiarist, the guy who steals everyone's ideas.
Plagiarism. Yeah. Darth Plagiarism.
You know what though? Yeah, because if Darth Plagueis, because if he was Darth Plagueis and then he was just kind of in the background and stuff like that, I almost don't even like the fact
and
that
there's a reason.
Yeah, it is. It's a reason, and I don't even like the fact that Palpatine came back. I mean, it's okay. It's not a big deal, but I just don't understand. The other thing is that Rey. It doesn't make sense for a Skywalker saga to have Rey be granddaughter of Palpatine. We're not really ending the Skywalker.
I have to say, I love those memes with the Spider-Man reference. So we're using our fake names then.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I do remember because of course I still watched all 3 of these at the movie theater. I still did it. But when you at the end, she's about to say Rey Skywalker. She's about to say it. And you just sit there and you're sitting there waiting for the cringe. And then it comes and you're like, damn it. You had that sliver of hope that she wouldn't say it. Because honestly, It should have been Ben that survived.
And
because he's a Skywalker. It's a Skywalker saga.
I believe so. I believe that too. And yeah. And on top of that, I do have a hard time just thinking of with all his selfishness and all of his quest for power that Palpatine would progenerate, right? Like that he would have any kind of family.
Right. That's hard to swallow. But at the same time, like, okay,
you're gonna live forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. If your plan is to live forever, thoughts of like that's what having kids kind of is it's like protecting your lineage and stuff like that, because we don't last around forever. If you're going to live forever, or you have, which he obviously learned from Darth Plagueis, a way to do so, then who cares if you have kids? They're just gonna get in the way at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the other part to this, is that's what throws you out. My biggest deal, regardless of anything that they did, any of the other I guess crimes against Star Wars that these guys committed, the biggest one, this was supposed to be the ending of the Skywalker saga. It was 1 through 9 Skywalker saga. It's a family story. It's about the lineage, and to take it away really pulls the rug out from under all of that.
Right at the last minute.
Yeah, it takes all the other ones, and like, you can say what you want. And I told my buddy Lino this. I said, look, now that they did 7, 8, and 9, I don't want to hear another person. I don't want to hear anyone else talk down on episodes 1 through 3 anymore. Because 7, 8, and 9.
I have always been, yeah. I never minded. I liked 1, 2, and 3. They were different than the original, obviously, but yeah, they told a good story. They were fine. I never had really any gripes about them. Like, I can even deal with Jar Jar. I get that he's annoying, but I can deal with it. I've never had the same complaints that I do with the last 3, excuse me. And it's really just like what we've just been talking about. It doesn't feel like Star Wars. They're breaking too much of their own world building. They are, I hate bringing this up, but they're like using inclusivity for inclusivity's sake, which I don't care about in general. I think Rey would make a great protagonist if she was written like a protagonist should be written, and not as a boring Mary Sue that can do everything. That is never a good character, whether it's female, male, anything. when you have no flaws. So as you, I think, know, I run a D&D podcast, and I play and I'm a DM, and I play a lot of tabletop games. And I always tell my players, like, don't fake your rolls. Don't get all high stats, because like one or two games are going to be like, yeah, I'm rolling everything. This is fun, but you're going to get bored. When you have no flaws and can do everything, it gets boring. And that's one of the reasons, like, for instance, I've never really cared about Superman as a hero. He's never been like, my wife likes him, but I've always, no, Superman's boring. You can shove kryptonite, but it's so predictable because it's the only thing. But
hey, what's going on, Ashley?
It's just boring when you have everything good.
Yeah, and that's funny you bring that up, because that's been my thing for decades. There's even a thing in storytelling, because I went to school for screenwriting, and like I've talked to people and done seminars on screenwriting, in story development. And the thing with Superman, there's actually a term called the Superman problem. And this is reason why they ended up giving him kryptonite and all this other stuff. But the Superman problem is a real thing in storytelling. And because what happens is, when you're going to connect with a character, it's hard for you to have a good character development progression, and hard for you to get to tension and, goals and obstacles and all that stuff.
There's no conflict.
So like when I've always felt the same way you feel about Superman. Like, I've always talked about this for years. Superman is a boring character. He really is. That's why I think I always felt like the Man of Steel version of Superman was a little bit better. They used his personality as some of his flawed nature and some other things. And so,
because you need that. You
have to have
flaws to create conflict, to make a story.
Yeah, it's so important. And so, like, when you think about Ray, and like what you were talking about, everyone's just going to assume that, and it's just because everyone looks for an excuse as to why someone didn't like them, or why they didn't like what they did. They can never take responsibility for themselves. And that's why it always gets thrown around that, like, well, you don't like Ray because she's a woman. You don't like this person because she's,
no, that's not the case at all.
It's just how you write, because I
think having a woman lead character is a great idea, but it was executed not by Daisy Ridley, but by the writers very poorly. And for the sake of a story, not that, and that's the gripe.
And this is the thing, is like, so this is why you have Daisy Ridley, who doesn't want to do it anymore. John Boyega got wasted. The Finn character could have been an interesting character, but they just blew that. They blew it. They could have had something with him, and they blew that. And so, like, the other thing too is, like, people love Carrie Fisher and Princess Leia
just because they are. Yeah, you can't treat a character like it feels like, and this happens a lot in media in general lately, and it's because of the age that we're in and everything is going on. But when you have a female or person of color or whatever lead characters or whatever, it feels like the writers are afraid to do anything bad to them.
Because they feel like it's okay. Well, if we put them in compromised position, people are going to be upset that we put them in the compromised position.
But it doesn't matter. I think you and I agree. It doesn't matter what age, race, sex, color, whatever that you are. If you're the protagonist, you have to have those compromised positions, because that's what creates conflict and makes a story. That's the very basics of writing and storytelling.
Yeah, because character development really hinges upon what you do in your most dire circumstances. So, like, when we talk about, so one of my favorite movies, I think one of the most well-done superhero movies ever, is The Dark Knight. And The Dark Knight, you have the Joker is putting Batman in a position because he wants Batman to kill him. That's really what it boils down to, because Batman doesn't kill people, but he wants to put, so that's in Batman's character. And now Bruce Wayne, Batman, gets put in that position, and he doesn't end up killing the Joker. Now, what it shows is, when you're at your most desperate and when you have your back's against the wall, what comes out. And if you don't put your characters in those positions, those compromised positions, you can't show the audience what their real character is because they never had to face the choice. And one of the biggest things about storytelling when you're doing character development is you want to put your characters into worse and worse and worse and worse positions until you get your climax and your resolve. And so like if they're constantly just, oh, there's a guy with a bunch of force powers who was trained by Luke Skywalker. Maybe if I swing the lightsaber a couple more times, I'll get him. That's not how it works.
That's not believable. It's not believable, and it's not. And I mean, when you go to see a movie, especially a sci-fi or a fantasy movie, I mean, there's an expectation that there's going to be a suspension of disbelief. There's things that are not going to be believable, but are going to be enjoyable anyway. But there is a limit to how far you can stretch that.
Yeah. Well, it has to fit within the pre-ordained or the pre-written out, like
world building.
Yeah, the world building, the rules of the world. Like, so like you can't be
that's the world building and the physics, the rules that you set.
Yeah, because we'll like audiences and readers will set aside real world physics and beliefs and stuff that doesn't make sense to them as long as that's already in the story, and then as long as everything else plays along with that
and it's consistent.
Yeah, because you can't go. It'd be like, this is really going to be probably the worst metaphor, the most simplistic metaphor I can come up with. But if you were to do a Back to the Future Part 4 and they go in the past and nothing gets messed with in the future, it's gonna be like, oh no, this ain't a Back to the Future movie, because in Back to the Future they've already set the precedent in 3 movies that if you do something in the past, it messes with your future.
Right.
So Star Wars is doing the same thing with those.
No, you have to stay within the parameters that you've already set.
Correct. And so when you have,
otherwise you're just a toddler telling a story. Oh, and I can fly now. Oh no, I've got laser vision. No, the laser vision makes me invulnerable.
Yeah.
Well, you can't be invulnerable because I have the space rock.
Yeah, you didn't shoot me because I have my force filled up. You didn't know I had my force filled up. When did we start having force fields?
Yeah, that's that's what it feels like.
Yeah, for sure. And so like that's the thing. The sequel trilogies are kind of, that's big. But I think what they're going to do now too, because they have post sequel trilogy plans in the works, and they're using what I've read is that they're going to use it's animation, but not like cartoon animation like Rebels or Clone Wars. It's going to be like as realistic as possible, but animated. And they're going to be focusing on Rey's children. And that's, I guess, what's going to be happening post episode 9. So they're going to have, Kira and someone else.
But isn't Rey a Skywalker?
Yeah, so
shouldn't we have ended the Skywalker series saga?
Right, but the other part to that is
quotes around Skywalker. I don't know who's listening to this on audio.
Yeah. So think about this too. Is one of the, I don't know how true it is, so I can't confirm that this is a real rumor or real thing, but the rumor has it that they're trying to play with some ideas that turns Rey into an official Skywalker by some sort of essence / spirit meld of Ben and her. That Palpatine somehow fused their souls together. And it actually messes with her DNA.
Okay. Why? Why would Palpatine do that? By accident?
I don't know. You tell me. But the thing is like, what are they going to do? There's nothing they can do to fix these. This is what I've been saying for a while. It's like, no matter what retcon they do, you really can't fix it without scrapping it.
I think they should just put. I think the sequel trilogy needs to be put into Star Wars Legends and removed from canon.
I agree. The only problem is they're taking Legends and putting it back into canon.
What? When did they announce this? I missed this.
So I was reading up on that, and that's the plan, is they want to take things from Star Wars Legends and move from there. But the problem is, if you're going to do that, I don't know how you, no matter which direction you go in, episode 7, 8, and 9, you're screwed. You can't have 7, 8, and 9 with no matter what you do.
That's kind of awful.
And I think if they're going to go
as standalone movies, they were fun. They're like fan fiction to me. Is kind of what it
really,
like,
really
you don't get everything right, and it's just
they were fan fiction done by non-fans of Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
People weren't fans of Star Wars.
Yes,
and this totally obvious, and we know this. Rian Johnson didn't even really. He's like, yeah, I mean, I watched it. But I don't know
what to live it. If you, I mean, this is such a.
Oh, they're coming for you.
Okay.
You talked
no.
About Ray.
So I've got dual monitors since I'm hooked onto my laptop instead of my desktop. My screen turned off, but I wasn't paying attention, so I thought my lights went.
That's
dimmed.
what I thought. I thought your lights went.
Threw me off for a second.
Yeah,
that was just my monitor.
Nice. Yeah. So I don't know what all the
they. I don't know, but if they continue to at least go in the direction Mandalorian is going, at least Mandalorian feels like it fits in the Star Wars universe.
It really does.
They are so far sticking within the bounds of, like I was saying, the world building and everything that they had previously created.
They're knocking it out of the park.
Not a Mary Sue that can just use the Force. Yeah, they're doing great. I'm really enjoying Mandalorian.
Yeah, and we'll see how it all goes, because what I've heard is that Kathleen Kennedy is taking a back seat to Jon Favreau, and that Jon Favreau is supposed to be taking over the Lucasfilms portion of Disney, and that George Lucas is actually back, because he's actually been back to help with some of the Mandalorian recent episodes.
I can't imagine him staying away after seeing what they did in the last 3 movies.
And you realize, okay, I don't know if
they're like, oh, my babies.
Yeah, I don't know if you know this, but when he sold Lucasfilms to Disney, he actually sold his prequel or his sequel trilogy scripts to them.
Yeah, I heard that, but I heard that they didn't get used at all.
No, because Bob Iger decided to go a different way. And Bob Iger actually talked about it, and it's not like it's a secret. He didn't hide it. I just think what happened was Disney thought that they could do something different, and they were like, you know what, it's going to be fine. We got new audience, new age groups, and, we'll just reboot this thing and make it our own and develop our own universe in Star Wars and blah, 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 play in this sandbox that we want to play in. And it's just like, with a thing like Star Wars that's so deep, this is why the box office numbers were dripping for season 9 because Star Wars isn't just like a regular intellectual property. It's not something that only has a movie or a cartoon that happened years ago. It's got people have been thinking about Star Wars and reading the books and talking and arguing about Star Wars for generations. And so everybody has it in their mind what Star Wars is. It's already settled. The conversation's been had. It's done.
I was actually about to hit on that point myself earlier when I was talking about when we were talking about they weren't even fans, and you really have to like live in Star Wars if you're going to want to direct one, because the audience and the people who've been consuming this since the 70s are so invested and know this like front and back that, I mean, if you don't, well, you get what we got, which to some people loved it, but I think those people loved it. And I don't want to be a gatekeeper here and say you can't enjoy it. Like I said, as a standalone movie, I can see why you would enjoy it, but I also kind of see why it's so upsetting to the people who have been invested in in what Star Wars is for so long to
Mhm.
see that broken.
Well, exactly. And if this is your first exposure to Star
And
Wars, you're
it
probably
was
not going to be
broken.
very affected. So like if this trilogy was your first
Yeah.
exposure to Star Wars, you're really not going to be affected as much because this is the start of it for you. But a lot of those people are, at least from what I've heard and like things I've seen online, is people who liked the sequel trilogy aren't necessarily saying that they think it's a great Star Wars trilogy or it's part of that trilogy. They just kind of like the movies. Just thought that was cool. They're not into the depth of the
Yeah. I mean, I know people. I do know of people who are different, that actually like think that, you know, they were the greatest ones for some reason, at
yeah,
Star Wars movies.
I don't know if I can
And I
talk to some
think
of
I
them.
know the reasons why, and it doesn't actually have, and I don't think it actually has anything to do with them being Star Wars, and more about uh, what it meant to them that they went the whole inclusivity route.
Right,
Which,
for sure.
fine, whatever. And if you liked those movies, I'm not even going to say like you're not a Star Wars fan. You are still a Star Wars fan, for liking those movies. I'm just saying that in the scheme of things, they broke fundamental world building that was already established for like no good reason, really.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what is upsetting, I think, the majority of the people who don't like it.
It's like, this is kind of a weird rabbit trail too, because like it's kind of like, okay, I'm not saying this is the only thing wrong with the live action He-Man Masters of the Universe. I don't know if you heard about that, like in the 80s with Dolph Lundgren. So there's a lot to say about the corniness and
Mm-hmm.
cheesiness of that movie. However, one of the biggest things that broke it was that they did most of the movie on Earth instead of in He-Man's the
Oh,
city, the planet
well,
that's
yeah.
it
There's a bunch
breaks.
of movies that end up doing stuff like that, where they take
Yeah.
place on Earth where they shouldn't. Like, um, it wasn't as a big of a detractor as I thought it was going to be when they did the recent Sonic movie. But
Right.
even still, um, like I mean, I guess there is precedence for that, because in the animated series it was
Right.
an animated series where Sonic and Tails went through a portal to Earth and all that. So I
Mm.
mean, that's fine. But there are plenty of other movies that have done that exact same thing and put something that is supposed to take place on something completely alien and that fits the narrative that they're telling, and moving it to Earth where it doesn't fit because that's not where it's supposed to be. And then everything is disjointed.
Well, because then you get your main character out of its element, and what people are wanting to see is that character in its
Yeah.
environment. Like, and especially when you first start. I mean, if you had some sequels down the road
Yeah.
and you found a way to put them in that position, then great, it might work. But when you're doing it right off the bat, when you're first introducing people to these characters, it's really hard for people who have spent time in the story and in the world to, because it jars them out of it, because they're like, this isn't the world that I was really thinking of. It'd be like if if they had done Lord of the Rings, but it wasn't in, in a place where there was elves and
It was in New
trolls.
Zealand and not Middle
Yeah,
Earth.
it was just literally in New Zealand, and like that would be the
I
same
mean,
concept.
yeah.
And like they have
Filmed on location with real hobbits.
yeah. This has been filmed in front of a live studio audience. So, but yeah, that's the big thing. And I mean, we've got, speaking of He-Man, because He-Man's actually finally going to be here. I think it's in 2022 or 2021, maybe. Because they went through like 12 writers and like a bunch of directors, and it hopped to three different studios, something like that. Sony Pictures is doing it now. Finally, it's like actually.
Oh, that's what I was thinking of. I was trying to think of another movie that had that example, but the Mario Brothers.
Oh my
Same
gosh,
kind of deal.
yes. But I was a kid when I watched that, so it was okay because I didn't care. But like, yeah, when you watch that as
oh, even as a kid, I was so confused.
right, that was
I
kind of
was so confused watching that.
I get it, but those movies are really hard to adapt. Like, how do you make a Mario Brothers movie? But they had the cartoon, didn't do too bad. But the other thing too, but see with those movies too, is there's not a lot other than the video game. So like you can kind of play with it, but Star Wars you can't play with. This was started as a movie. This started as a live action film that had a trilogy that was successful, and then had a prequel trilogy, and then you had books, you had games that played in as canon. We're talking so many pieces to this puzzle that were already put together, and then they just threw the puzzle off the table and tried to start putting in new pieces. And then they built like a Lego tower instead of a puzzle anymore. It's just so different. Like it's not even in the same vein. You're like, okay, we were swimming in the ocean. Now all of a sudden we dove downwards and now we're on a mountain. What happened? Like, it's just confusing. And like,
that's a good analogy.
Yeah, there's a lot of movies that have suffered from that. Like, my opinion. So the other thing too, when you think about, so what had happened, not to say they turned out to be great movies, but the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle live action reboot films, they were definitely geared towards, young kids. And so I get it. But when you think about what happened with that, the original script for that Ninja Turtles movie was that the Ninja Turtles were going to come from a different planet.
Yeah, you know what? I actually didn't watch them because I heard that and I thought I can't do that to myself. And I never actually ended up watching them. Did they not end up doing that?
No. So what happened was that storyline got leaked. I think it got leaked on purpose because I think what happened was there was people that were like, I'm not so sure.
Some writers in there like, this guy sucks. I'm gonna.
Or they were like, let's see what people think about it, and if they're too mad about it, we'll fix it. Because they did, they changed it. Because Shredder was gonna be what's the guy's name? Gosh dang it, he's a famous actor too. Basically, Shredder was going to be this white guy. I can't remember the guy's name. Finchner or Fitch. Gosh dang it. He was also on The Dark Knight, actually.
Is that just based on the little bit of face that shows in the cartoon? I mean.
Yeah. So, he was going to be just this American guy. He was a general. He was going to be a general, and his name was going to be. So, basically, the original script was that the Ninja Turtles were going to be coming from outer space. They were aliens. And there was going to be a general that was looking for them. And his name, he was going to be General Schroeder. General Schroeder. And that was who was going to become Shredder. That
the Ninja Turtles, they have an existing good origin story.
Yeah. It's like, what was wrong with the others?
They're not Teenage Mutant. It's not TMNT anymore. It'd be TANT. Tant.
Exactly. They're not mutated.
They can take the tant and put it up. Similar sounding word.
Yeah. I think the first one off of the reboot wasn't horrible. I mean, it was definitely a kid's movie, and I actually enjoyed it a bit. And the only thing I enjoyed really about the second one was that they brought Bebop and Rocksteady and Baxter Stockman in there, and so it was kind of cool. But the writing is just kind of like, you might as well just be watching the cartoon.
Well, as long as they're not doing what I thought that they were doing, which I never looked back up on it, obviously,
right?
And I'll probably go watch it at some point now with my kid, probably.
My thing is,
that's fine. I was not about to spend my money on a teenage mutant, alien, not even mutants. I can't even say it. I mean, are they even ninjas at that point? Ninjutsu's an Earth thing.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing too, is like, so I mean, they're worth the watch. I've always, the way I've always described the new reboot of the Ninja Turtles, they're worth a watch. They're nothing to like, they don't build on anything, but they're, especially if you watch it with your kids, it's going to be fun. They got cool music. There's cool stuff going on.
I liked the new Sonic for the same kind of reason. It was actually pretty good. And the reservations I had about them doing Jim Carrey as Dr. Robotnik, but then again, it plays off in the end after the credits perfectly, because he finally actually looks the part at the end there. Right. If you ever stayed through the credits, it was a good little Easter egg. You're like this weird, like Robotnik's, he's Dr. Eggman because he looks like an egg. So when you finally get to see him looking like that, that was some good payoff.
Yeah, and now he's on that other planet, which now might be.
No, if Yeah, it was full of mushrooms.
Yeah, for sure. So like that's a that
But
yeah. I thought Sonic was cool. Like especially for like that's a movie I was happy enough with it that like as long as I'm, if me and my family are watching it and I have my kids with me, like it's a good enough movie. They did a good enough job. Wasn't too bad.
yeah,
But yeah, we got off on this
and
rabbit trail.
that's an example of one of those things like where you're talking about the script being leaked.
Mhm.
And then changing that, this is one of those examples where that can be a good thing because the same thing happened with Sonic, right?
Right.
The
The
animation
way
of
he
Sonic
looked.
was
Yeah.
shown, and people were like, "No, no,
What are
no,
you?
that
No,
can't
no,
be
no, no,
it,
no. You can
no."
do whatever
And
you
then
want to the movie, but this looks ridiculous.
that's not Sonic. It is like they tried to almost go like a little too hyper realistic, and when
Yeah,
they brought it back and made him a bit more cartoony, it was more believable. It was just that weird
exactly.
uncanny valley area they had him
Yeah,
in,
sometimes you can't
but
cross
it
that.
helped. And you know what? The studio listened and they went
Yep.
back and they made it, and I think it's way better for them doing so. But I also have reservations about people being able to bully a studio or thing into depicting the, changing their artistic visions, right? Like it's one thing saying like, hey, this we know what Sonic looks like because it's an existing thing and this looks horrible, versus like you can't make this character that way that's because it's not PC enough or things like that. Like
Yeah,
studios are getting like bullied into other things, and that's where I have some reservations about that. Like you got
yeah,
to
I
let
do
people tell
too.
their stories. Like it doesn't, if you don't have representation, it's like people like, oh, there were no X actors or actresses in here. Like we got to boycott this movie, and like but that plays nothing into the story. That's not. I don't have a big problem like with what you were talking about with having them having a white guy play Shredder. Um, I don't care
I kind
who
of do.
plays Shredder as long as they play a good Shredder.
My
As
thing
long as they
is
play a good Shredder, he's in a mask. All you're gonna see is this much.
true, but in the Turtles
At least
movie,
hopefully he's in a mask.
well, he was out of it for a lot of the first one, but the the actual
Okay.
Shredder. But there
See?
was actually a pretty cool moment in that reboot. There was a scene that's actually taken from a deleted scene from the 90s movie. They redid a scene that was deleted from the
Oh
90s
really?
movie with
I
Shredder.
love those 90 movies.
But if you take that scene, man, if they would have taken that scene and kept the same tone throughout the new reboot, it would have been a lot better. But see, the thing is when the problem slash understandable thing, because they're like, well, Turtles is a kids movie, so we gotta cater it to kids. I get it. I wish we just had two different versions, because the 90s, the first movie that came out for the Ninja Turtles was great, but it was kind of a little bit dark, a little moody, and parents were a little upset about it. And so they changed. So number 2 and number 3 are a little different. Secret of the Ooze and the one where they go to Japan or go back in time. But
Mm-hmm.
the problem with that is like I always say, well, oh yeah, I get it's a kids movie, but you do realize that these are the movies that older people watched. They're older now, so you're
Yeah,
the
right.
ones who actually
Yeah.
know it.
Grow with your audience.
You could do that, but then they're like, how do you strike that balance of now having a new kids movie so they could sell new toys? And that's what happened to Batman. So after Tim Burton, the whole toy thing got in the way of Batman. So like they were like, so
Oh yeah.
Batman, so the Joel Schumacher Batman that gets a lot of ridicule, I think it's Batman Forever. Um, they
With you mean with the bat nipples?
Yeah, so that movie was scripted after that movie got scripted after the toy companies designed everything. So they had the toy companies design everything that
Oh
needed to be
man.
in it. And then so they said, here, now you have to write a script around these toys. And you have to have a certain amount of this in it so that kids want to play with this toy or play with that toy. And those movies became really expensive toy commercials. And so you
Yeah.
sacrifice the
No, I see that.
cinema and the story so that you can sell these toys, which I get, whatever. It's a money thing. If they want to do it, they're doing it. But the movies will suffer. So you can't complain about the lack of interest in your films if you're just making a toy commercial. And what's great about our day and age right now is we're actually starting to see that movies actually do suffer viewership when they're not making an actual movie anymore. Like there's a lot of smart and really invested like film watchers, like movie watchers now. Like there are a lot of people who want to see a good Star Wars, good Marvel movies and the good everything. Like, and that's why they've been hiring people who actually know what they're talking about to do these movies now. And instead of, except for Disney kind of fumbled it, but
yeah,
Star Wars, but there's a lot of that going on where it's like they're starting to realize that you need a Dave Filoni or Jon Favreau.
Look how big and how good the Marvel universe, cinematic universe, has become because of that. Like, yeah. They're striking that balance. They're striking that balance, and it has shown like substantial progress because of it.
Yeah, and that's because it's what it's doing is it's a lot of the people that were underdog movies that the studios did not think were going to do well, and they just decided to let some fanboy direct it, and then they're like, oh, that's weird, it did well, what happened? And like, because you think about
that's what people want to see.
Yeah, so like Deadpool, think about Deadpool, how that happened. Like that was Ryan Reynolds and a bunch of people who were fans of Deadpool trying to make a good Deadpool movie, and the studios didn't care about it at all.
It was Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, they didn't care about it.
I think it was
at
Ryan
all.
Reynolds. Like, I got to redeem myself from the X-Men, from the Wolverine movie.
Yeah,
that was the worst Deadpool.
Yeah, that was crazy how that happened. I just don't know how you even think that would work. Because there is
that wasn't Deadpool.
Deadpool just as Deadpool is, like, he doesn't really work as a character unless he's saying a bunch of stuff and being funny.
He's the merc with the mouth.
Yeah, that's his whole tagline.
Yeah, he's the merc with the mouth. You can't sew his mouth up.
And then they tried to make that stupid joke. Oh, they finally found a way to shut you up.
Who in their right mind? Who in their right mind would sew up Ryan Reynolds' mouth?
Fox.
That is the worst decision.
Yeah, people don't go watch Ryan Reynolds to watch.
You're shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, Ryan Reynolds doesn't get movie roles to stare at a camera. Like the best part of Ryan Reynolds is his mouth. But yeah, so like you think about a lot of those, because even the Ninja Turtles, the first 90s Ninja Turtles, that was the studio abandoned it, actually. So like they were already working on that movie, and then the studios didn't want to do it anymore, and they had to take it to Hong Kong to finish it. And that's when New Line Cinema came along. New Line Cinema was nothing. New Line Cinema wasn't nothing during that time. And they barely got it finished, and then it came out, and it was this huge, humongous. At the time, that was one of the biggest movies that had ever came out. And then New Line Cinema ended up becoming a bigger company, and then, you know, everybody wanted a piece of the pie, and the studios finally said, oh, it makes money. We want to be a part of this. And then they're like, but do this instead. It's just so weird to me that studios will be like, you were so successful on your own, we think you should change everything. You obviously don't know what you're talking about.
Right?
Wait, you guys didn't even want us to do this. Yeah, but we think we know what we're doing. The majority of hit movies.
You get big enough, they lose their soul.
Yeah, majority of big movies have happened when studios didn't want the movies to happen. So like Back to the Future was rejected tons of times, multiple times. Disney was one of the original studios they wanted to go with. Disney had a big issue with which I get it. Disney had an issue with the son kissing the mom, and the mom trying to come on to the son. Like that was the big Disney issue. They didn't like that idea.
Right.
And then, but then they put out, or no, was it Disney?
No Oedipus. Oedipus.
Yeah. But then you had also like Dirty Dancing was rejected like a bunch of times. You know that? rejected,
Yeah, yeah,
rejected.
yeah. That one I was aware of too.
RoboCop was rejected tons of times.
In the end, nobody puts baby in the corner.
In the end, you can't put her in a corner. Like, you can't. It'll just happen. And then just all these movies, if you go down the line of the most iconic movies, the ones that like changed pop culture, they weren't well received. The studios didn't really care about them. But that also gave people the freedom to do what they wanted.
So they were innovative.
And they almost had to be.
Yeah,
and then
exactly. They weren't in the mold that made money, quote unquote. Like
quote unquote. Yeah.
If you don't, if studios, if they can't see that, like, here is the mold that makes the money. If you're not in this, we can't guarantee that money's going to be made. So no.
Exactly. And then you have like
their outlook.
Exactly. So like when you think about the other thing people don't give credit to Star Wars for is I don't think people actually realize how much of modern cinema was changed and how much modern cinema took from Lucasfilms and ILM. Because ILM, which is, I think it stands for Industry of Light and Magic, which is what George Lucas created in order to create the effects for the old Star Wars movies. Because a lot of the technology didn't exist that he needed, and he created the technology. And he's the reason behind Lucasfilms helped create Jurassic Park. They helped create all those animatronics and all that stuff that they had going on in there. And a lot of people don't realize that Lucasfilms created Pixar. So Lucasfilms had Pixar because they were creating the computer generations. And then what happened was they weren't able to really utilize it yet. And Steve Jobs came along and partnered and bought Pixar and then sold it to Disney with the idea of doing the Toy Story movie. They did the Toy Story movie on it, and then Disney bought it completely. And that's how that all got rolling. That's all from Lucasfilms. Jurassic Park wouldn't exist without Lucasfilm. A lot of these movies nowadays, because they still use ILM was in all the video games for a while. Like, they were the ones creating all these effects that we enjoy today. And other companies have just basically piggybacked off of that. So Lucasfilm started all of this.
And if you want to go even further, look at, I mean, he was a big part of bringing that kind of genre and anything like that over here, because his big inspiration, of course, was Akira Kurosawa.
Right. Yes.
I mean, there's huge similarities between The Hidden Fortress, which I don't think a lot of American audiences has even seen at this point.
I don't know if anybody would even know what you're talking.
Like, amazing. Of course,
nobody would know what you're talking about. Like, I would say, like, a good 90% of people probably would not even know about that.
I enjoy those.
Well, that's the funny thing is, like,
people. I like those old samurai movies and stuff.
Yeah, and people don't recognize too is, like, if you go back and if you watch 4, 5, and 6, and you really pay attention, and then you watch 1, 2, and 3, and you watch all this other stuff, like the meticulous care to callbacks and detail and foreshadowing and the poetry that's involved in Star Wars, because Star Wars is more than just like a shoot 'em up sci-fi movie. People don't realize sometimes the movies you like the most, you don't understand why, but they hit you on a subconscious level because of some of the stuff that they did, and you don't realize how good of a story Star Wars actually is.
So there is and there's a great breakdown. There's a YouTube video that I watched that has a great breakdown of this, but and I'll try to think of it. Maybe I can find it. I don't know if you'd mind a plug. I don't know the person or anything. It's just it was really well done. But the difference between Eastern and Western storytelling, and where, you know, in our culture you get like the same thing as comic books. You get the heroes who are larger than life, and they go and they beat up the bad guy. Usually, in some cases, end up killing them, and some cases incarcerate. But there's the only redemption people usually have is in death. In Eastern storytelling, it is much more about the journey, and in almost all cases, and you can see this throughout all sorts of anime, and even I'll get to it in Star Wars in a sec, where you go on the journey. Think of the quintessential was it Journey to the West, right? Son Goku and all that. You you go through and you show your strength and you fight and stuff, but you turn your enemies into allies, and it's a whole different type of growth. And you even go as far as like Dragon Ball, which is Story to the West, which is Journey to the West, excuse me, just in a fantasy anime setting. And you get your enemies. You got like Piccolo, who becomes an ally, and Vegeta, who was an enemy, becomes an ally. And it's about turning people, and like almost reoccurring themes throughout all that kind of storytelling is forging bonds of friendship and the journey along the way, rather than the focus on the overcoming evil outcome part. Like, it's a big difference in storytelling, and you can even see that in the entire first trilogy, where in the end, it's not even Luke that takes out that stops the Empire, right? It's he finally turns Vader back from an enemy to an ally, in that same kind of Eastern style storytelling.
Right.
It is, but there's not to say there's not Western elements in there too, because I mean,
For sure.
big epics are like Norway, like think of like Beowulf, and true
Right.
epics, and that's what Star Wars is. It's a true epic, not the modern slang of the word, but the literary term of the word.
Yeah, and there's a lot of
and it's a great amalgamation of both.
Yeah, there's a lot of like Judeo-Christian type fable to it too. Which actually that'd be like a whole nother video, but there's a lot of the resurrection type, like reborn, all that stuff's kind of in there. But the type of things that people subconsciously, the good versus evil type things that people subconsciously latch to when they don't realize why, but it's because it's kind of a tradition or cultural thing that's been through, especially in the Western world, how it's been kind of portrayed. But the other thing, when you, I love how you just talked about the Eastern type things, because like there's a lot of things like in comedy, a lot of people don't think about in comedy, like British comedy versus American style comedy. So like you got like British comedy is very much based, and this has been talked about like by Stephen Fry and stuff, where British comedy really is based in the Catholic style of constant repentance. We're constantly messing up. We're damned. We don't really, there's really no hope. It's just you have to keep apologizing. You're always going to be just down. And their best characters and the people who they gravitate towards are the people who are always basically going to be losers. Basically, they're always going to fall on their face. And then in the Western world, we have redemptive characters, and that's from like the and the biggest difference is the Protestant type of style. So the Western world was based, when we broke away from England and that kind of culture, it was so deep in Catholicism, and then the Protestant Reformation happened. And sometimes we don't realize that those cultures and those traditions have just seeped through over the years. We've forgotten about where it originated from, but we've all kind of adopted it through our lineage. And so like when we have characters that are in comedies that we like, it's because they always have to, something has to always happen in the end. So like you have the nerdy girl who is unpopular and ends up becoming prom queen, and she's beautiful, and now that she's gotten a makeover, now everyone likes her and she's like really gorgeous, and like you just didn't see it, but now she's really amazing. But in British comedy, she would start climbing the ladder, but then something will happen and now she's still a nerd. They'll have to remind her she's still a weirdo. So like that's the biggest difference. And like that's the thing too, is when you can come in and like you were saying, like with the way that George Lucas kind of intertwined, not combined, but intertwined all of that, and it all plays off of each other, and you get the best elements of both, and you get to kind of play in that sandbox of like this interesting dynamic that Star Wars shouldn't work, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like the way Star Wars was, it shouldn't work, but it works. And we throw away George Lucas.
I mean, you don't see
just this guy who created a bunch of like space stories, but it's deeper than
that. Yeah, and you don't see arcs like that where in one movie you have the villain who is mercilessly like choking out his inferiors,
Right.
right? Over nothing really, just complete utter lack of utter disregard for like human life or anything. Like basically like scary, terrible, irredeemable villain to in the end actually feeling something for him and
Correct.
almost like rooting for him. Like, you know how people love Darth Vader?
Oh my gosh, he's my
Because
favorite.
I mean,
Anakin's my
for all
favorite.
sorts of reasons, but
Like the whole
yeah,
Anakin storyline is my
it's great. And
attraction to Star Wars.
and yeah, and even though I didn't like him in when he was all a whiny tween, but
Right.
as a character as a whole, I understand why he had to have that arc.
Right, and he was a fit thrower, but
That's another part of growth.
that makes sense though, because like, how do you go from see, and this kind of plays off when you really, if you want to, which it takes forever, but if you really dig deep and start picking through the first trilogy, the prequel trilogies, he's that kid that's like orphaned and doesn't have any direction, and so he's always throwing fits because he can't get his way. It's because he's kind of messed up and he's tortured and he doesn't know what to do. And the thing is, when Qui-Gon dies, so Qui-Gon Jinn dies, and now he doesn't have that father figure that he should have had, and now he's just doesn't know how to handle like growing up and wanting to be in love and this and that. And then you have Obi-Wan who's taking him on, but he's not like the other kids.
All he has is Nissan Obi-Wan.
Yeah, so and Obi-Wan really is more like a brother to
Obi-Wan.
him. And I feel like if you were to explore, which the stuff wouldn't, it'd be a boring movie, but if you were exploring like what was happening with him and Obi-Wan when the cameras weren't on, a lot of that was probably Obi-Wan not necessarily being the father figure to him, but kind of being buddy with him, and then kind of, feeling sorry for him in a lot of ways and letting certain things slide here and there. Because Anakin, okay, you have all the younglings that started out, and they're getting they kind of hint at the fact that a lot of the younglings are sitting there kind of training together. And then once they've gotten some basic training, then they get attached to a master and they become a Padawan. But Anakin just became a Padawan. It was just him and Obi-Wan. It's not like he was part of that schooling and that structure and had a teacher that kind of taught a class, because that's what it kind of looks like when you look at the Jedi Temple with the younglings. They were just kind of there. And there's even a scene with Yoda and them, and they have their helmets on and they have those little balls that shoot at them or whatever. So they were all training together. So Anakin never got that. And then the only person that was like someone who looked like he was really wise, that was a father figure to him, was Palpatine, was the Emperor. So like you could see,
well, yeah,
just be
that's how he got in his head. It started early.
Yeah, he just was throwing fits like a little kid does without direction. Like when you don't have that correction, you're just like, come on, why can't I have the cookie? Why can't I have
almost
candy?
Goes back. And this goes back almost all the way to like your gripe with Snoke getting into Ben's head. You know how long Palpatine was grooming Anakin?
Right. And to his
then
face.
Snoke is just like, I'm going to send some Force visions his way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you would think
no, that's not how, again, that's not how the world building works. That's not what we're shown to that this happens.
One of the things I've always thought about would have been really cool if they did the sequel trilogies would have been that if they explored the idea of Darth Vader's apprentice somehow being one of the main villains. So you had either Snoke or, like you said, Darth Plagueis or somebody who ended up taking on. And
you said Darth Vader's apprentices?
Yeah, well, like so. If Darth Vader had
the only one I can think about that is Starkiller.
Right, but what I'm saying is, they do different things because you have
Starkiller.
Yeah, because you have Ben Solo, but like he's supposed to be someone else. Like Han and Leia have two kids, I think in the books, and I don't know if one's Ben or not. They changed that up a little bit. But what I'm saying is, like, so you could have Star Killer, you could even named him something else. But because it would have been really cool, in my opinion, if you had Ben Solo, who was trained by Luke, and you had Luke and Ben, and the main villain ended up being like Snoke and this former Darth Vader apprentice. And that's who Ben ends up having to go after. So if that's the sequel trilogy was based on Luke's Padawan.
There's so much you could have done.
Yeah, I know. So like you go down these,
and the only reason I bring up Star Killer is because
that's the official.
The only reason I bring up Star Killer is because you said Darth Vader and not Anakin. Otherwise, I would have said Ahsoka. But
right,
we know Ahsoka didn't go.
Correct.
Well, we know she didn't end up as a Jedi or a Sith, so she's gray.
And I just feel like if you had a Darth Vader apprentice, and then you could play with that whole through line again of Luke and Ben trying to get Darth Vader's apprentice Star Killer to understand that, like, where he's conflicted as well, because he could have been conflicted throughout the trilogy, the sequel trilogy, and it could have been like poetry again.
I mean, it was clearly conflicted in the game.
In the game, yeah, for sure. So like, it's like
it's one of those things. I always ended up redeeming him.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you go, you had so many avenues to take, and you took this one. Like, you had so many options, Disney. It wasn't for a lack of options that you came up with 7, 8, and 9. You just failed to see the gems that you had.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I feel about it, because there's so many, like, whenever I sit down and think about like how I would do it or what I would have loved to have saw, like, I come up with like 50,000 different modes of ways that you could do it and still be happy. And I'm like, you had so many ways you could have taken this. You had so many directions you could have went in. And I don't know.
I would have just been happy if they stayed within their own world building. If they did something relevant to what was existing instead of basically building something from scratch with the names of things that we already loved.
Yep, and that comes back down to what I was saying. I feel like they tried to reboot it, and they just failed to see what the sequel
Make
trilogy
something
was
for this generation. Yeah.
But you could have done a reboot afterwards. So like if you did a sequel trilogy, 7, 8, and 9, kept the whole through line of the Star Wars or the Skywalker saga, ended it, wrapped it up in a nice tight little bow, made everybody happy. You could have came up with something on your own that kind of took place afterwards, and you could add your own characters, because nobody knows what happens after episode 9. Nobody, not one person knows what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could totally be like, okay, well, Luke's gone, Leia's gone, Han's gone. And then you could have introduced this character all of a sudden in episode 10. I mean, not even episode 10, whatever you did with the Star Wars series. You made a movie, and there's this girl named Rey who's lost on this planet trying to figure out who her parents are, and then she finds out she's a Palpatine. It's a new saga, a new ship has sailed. You could have done that. You would have been fine. Nobody would have cared. Mm-hmm. And as long as Rey actually had to go through some progressions, I guess, instead of basically being
exactly
at Luke Skywalker's level by episode 9.
Right? How does she resist? How does she resist her mind getting bored into, right? With no training from a trained actual Skywalker.
Yeah. And how Ben didn't mop the floor with her.
They're breaking their own rules, and it bugs me. Yeah. And there's so many ways that you can handle that. They do that all the time in like anime and stuff like that, where you can keep the big bads away from, or the big goods, even, for one thing. In order to draw something out, it's very, very common that your main character who's overpowered is delayed for one reason or another. Sometimes it's silly, sometimes it's important, but there's always Um, there's always a different buildup. There's always a reason why things aren't like the big clash isn't happening right away, and there's time for people to train. And there's already Eastern influence in Star Wars as a whole. You can by all means utilize that, and they didn't.
For sure. And that's just, yeah, they didn't. There's not much more you could do with that.
They dropped the ball.
Yeah. What's something you would have liked
Half
to
of
see?
Star Wars
Tell me.
is not Star Wars at all.
Yeah, give me an
That I
idea
would
of like
have liked to see
a run through of what 7, 8, and 9 would have been like if you would have done it.
if I would have done it. I feel like it's so at this point it is so like I'm so influenced by things that have already started to either work on that or what I know I don't like that it's going to be hard to be original. But I feel like The Mandalorian is a great example where you have the rebels expanding their influence into a retreating empire and things like that happening. But I would have honestly, I would have moved away from the Skywalkers. I don't think they needed another 3 Skywalker movies. I feel like that tale was told. Like you had your Force ghosts waving goodbye at the end, and like it's good. We're done. Now we can tell so many other stories because there is such a vast playground for them to be in. But they go back to Tatooine, and they go.
You go back to Tatooine.
Why?
And she buries the lightsabers down deep.
Why is Tatooine so important? Yeah. Why is Tatooine so important? The backwater desert. I get it. That's where they hid Luke. Why do we have to keep going back to there?
Yeah.
I understand we took Anakin away, and that was fine because then you have family of theirs still on there, and that's where Luke went. But how did a Palpatine end up there?
I have no idea, and I also don't understand. Okay, so when he lifts, one of the things, okay, this is the other thing we were talking about with disbelief, but you know, there's some disbelief you have to have, but there's certain disbelief that's just too much.
Yeah.
Like when all the freaking ships came out and just started rising up, like he had all these ships that were magically built. He's like, here you go. Here's your new empire. Blah, blah, blah. I was like, come on. You've got one last movie to wrap this up. Like, this is all in the same movie. Like, you're doing all of this, and then they all get destroyed.
I know. And I guess on that point, the other gripe, too, is Luke Skywalker, but isn't he just a legend? Dude, that was like 30 years ago. Not even that, maybe. You're on his birthplace, and how do you not know? How is that legend by now?
Yeah.
I know who plenty of people are from the last 100 years in my own history.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And it's like, yeah,
how do you not know that?
Yeah. Because the other thing too, I was thinking about something the other day, and I can't even remember exactly how it worked out, but I don't see how it would have been too far down the road where people would forget, because they kept saying, oh, we thought that was a myth, or we thought this was a legend, or we thought this wasn't real. It's like when Rey was talking about, oh, the Force is real. Wouldn't she have known? She's got to know. It's not too far off,
right?
Especially on Tatooine.
Yeah, it's not exactly.
Like, that's not that far long ago.
Well, for that one, I have a bit more of an answer. So at least a guess. So Luke didn't know all that much about it either. And the reason I think is that once Order 66 happened, I'm sure the Empire really hushed it down. They didn't want people thinking about it. I'm sure people were afraid to talk about it.
Right.
So the knowledge of the Force, I can understand that. Though, like the as far as the time frames, okay, there's always going to be inconsistencies because, of course, in the first movie, you know, your ancient and outdated religion or whatever, talking to Darth Vader, but that hasn't been all that long since the Jedi were a widespread phenomena.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
so the time frames don't really work, and that's kind of consistent. That part didn't bother me so much, but her not knowing the names of the forces that within the fairly recent history of the galaxy that
big
actually
war.
has good communication with each other.
Right. Of this
Yeah.
big, huge war that happened. And you would think too, because the fact that she was on a, you know, basically she was working with people that were, because that one guy she was selling all the stuff to, like everybody on Tatooine would have had, there would have been conversations about a lot of this stuff. Because the Empire, even in the other movies, wasn't too, they didn't seem to care about Tatooine that much. Like Tatooine was pretty much left alone. Like
Exactly.
you had, you know, Jabba the Hutt and his gangsters and all that stuff, and it was one of those scourge type planets. And they even said this is where people can get away, like where people go to hide. And so, like the stories that were told all around there, I don't know. I just feel like, yeah, I think that's almost like a moot point that we could kick down the road forever.
Yeah.
But it is what it is.
Yeah, that one. But that takes me out of the story, you know?
Because a lot of stuff from 7, 8, and 9 takes me out of the story.
And it's just.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, yeah. And on that note, I think that's a good place to go. Pretty much taking that as far as we could take it.
Yeah, it's been. Yeah, it's been a bit. Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah,
it
thank
was
you for
fun
coming
having
on.
the
Like,
chat, and
I hope we could do it again.
yeah, I'm down, definitely.